Before I became a follower of Jesus Christ, I was born and raised in the Catholic Church. So I knew who God was. I knew what He did for us. I was in the Catholic schools for 8 years, and I went through the motions and understood. Every Wednesday we went to church, every Sunday we went to church, twice a week we attended Mass, and I didn't really have a relationship with Jesus, and it showed in my life. Early on in my life I turned to alcohol and tobacco use, 10, 12 years old, and that continued pretty much throughout my life. In high school, we're always looking for the party. I had the keg and rounding up the troops and heading out to the woods for a kegger. And life was just a big party. It didn't really matter what happened in my family or anything like that. We were either at the racetrack partying or out in the woods partying. After high school, I turned to marijuana as my drug of choice. It didn't quite have the hangover, so I could do more drugs than I could alcohol. So it pretty much took over my life and kind of numbed me emotionally. And the relationships were very shallow at the time. The people I was around, it was just about the drugs and booze. When we'd have at work, if we got sent out for training or just go to a different town, we'd frequent the strip clubs and stuff like that. It was all about me and internal satisfaction, gratification about me. And even after I met my wife, it was it was a shallow relationship. We were great together. We got along great, and she understood that it didn't matter where I got my appetite as long as I came home for supper. And it didn't really matter to me what she thought about me going out to strip clubs and partying, and I really wasn't worried about how she felt about it, and never really thought about the negative impact it had on her and her son at the time. So trying to raise a young boy was pretty rough with that kind of thought process. It was you thought and raised him out of guilt of what I was doing rather than the right way of dealing with issues. And when my dad committed suicide in 2000, my wife and I had been together for maybe 3 years or so, and that's when it really hit me hard. I worked 12 hours a day, and I'd come home from work, eat supper, say hi to family, and go down to the garage and just get high all night long until it was time to go to bed. And that was really no life to have at all, and I knew it, but it didn't matter. My drug use started out as a coping mechanism. I was early on, I just didn't think it mattered. It didn't hurt anybody relationally. Your parents, it didn't matter if you did drugs, because everybody treated their family like that. It definitely later on in life was used as a numbing agent. There was a lot of depression going on, especially every February came around like clockwork. It was a low point in my life for like 10 years, and it was just a way to escape. It took the edge off when things weren't so bad, and it knocked the peaks off of after realizing how down my life was and how miserable my wife probably would have been if you were to ask her. It wasn't a good place at that point in time. If things kept going the way they were, we probably wouldn't be married today. I knew that there had to be more to life than what I was doing, and I prayed to God because I knew how to pray. I just didn't. I said, God, please show me something. Explain to me where my life is supposed to be going. Because right now, this isn't it. I know it's not where my life's supposed to be heading. And I don't know how long it was after that. Probably a week, 2 weeks. My sister-in-law knocks on the door. Now, she was the Jesus freak of the family, She was a follower of Christ at the time. And she didn't know how to explain to me that God told her to bring me a book. And I'm like, sure, what is it? Beauty to Ashes from Joyce Meyer. And now I don't care for her at all, but I did read the book, and it really explained a lot of what God meant in my life about forgiveness and, letting the bad go. The abuses of your life and just the tragic things that you're self-medicating, like God doesn't want you to live that way. And, it was a turning point in my life. And I quit a toxic job after this, after turning my life over to Jesus, because there was a light at the end of the tunnel, quite literally. I saw a light and the only door that was open, and there was a sun shining through, and God said, just go out that door and don't turn back. And most people with a worldly point of view are not going to leave an $18 an hour job because God told them to. But I did. I walked out the door and I never turned around and went back. And I didn't know at the time why, but I didn't realize that God was setting us up to move up here to Bradford. We got a position within the church, and we moved to Bradford, and really set our sights on Jesus, and living the life that He wants us to live, so we can live life to the full. I used to think that the next great party or the drugs was the living life to the full, and standing around a campfire life don't get any better than that, But looking back now, it was just a waste of time, Like, I look at the things that go on in my life on a day-to-day basis, the people that I meet, and just the reactions of how God's working in their life, and being able to share with them what God's done in my life, and to see how that affects them, really means a lot to me. I used to do drugs and to take the edge off of the things going on in my life, but since I became a follower of Jesus and walking along the righteous path that He wants for me, the edge is no longer there. There's not the peaks and valleys emotionally that there used to be. It's a very, very consistent emotionally. There's bad times and good times. There's feeling good and feeling low, but it doesn't affect me the way it used to. I don't have that rage or that extreme sadness, it just, there's no edge anymore. It's more clear line of thought with Jesus way. With my relationships now, they're deeper than they ever were, or I could even think possible. There's just a wonderful feeling about being with my wife and my family. You know, I even see a change in my kids' attitudes and a change in Chad a lot since this is going on, and you don't realize it until something bad happens in a relationship where you got to confront an issue or deal with an issue, and if you do it God's way and they do it God's way, it's amazing the results. There's a deeper strength in the end of it all. You know, I never had a relationship where when you had an issue and you had an argument that you actually solved the issue, and in the end you didn't have the argument again ever, you know. But now when there's an argument, there's a resolution by doing it God's way, or at least an understanding of how the other person feels about it. And in the end, there's a strength and an amazing feeling, you know what I mean? It's like a growth in your relationship, and that is much stronger in the end. If you're on the fence of deciding whether you want to follow Jesus or not, you know, just ask God to show you ways that your life can improve. You know, it doesn't take much insight to see where your life is bad. If you're honest with yourself, you'll see quickly where your life is in need of something better. You know, you can do life your own way and get your own results. That's where you're at right now. If you don't follow Jesus, you're getting what you've always come up with. You know, and I like to understand that God's ways are better than ours, and that's for sure. You're going to get God's results if you rely on God and decide to follow Jesus.